Man, I'm joining the trend at this point on YouTube of hating on Hollywood and the shit that's coming out of it. I didn't. I haven't always felt this way, but like just recently, like one of the only movies that I've wanted to see in years and years and years was announced, which was Roofman. Because that fun criminal, to say the least, his story. Yeah, like hell yeah, I want to watch this. If few criminals are this much fun as this guy, but you know, uh, Riffman is definitely an interesting and fun criminal. So, anyways, a fun-loving criminal. So, anyways, when I when I saw that, like the natural reaction that I had was, "Oh my god, it's finally a movie after years and years and years and years of fucking nothing." I mean, the last time Hollywood did something that I found myself, interested in seeing, it was 2019's Promising Young Woman, which, by the way, gets, one of the few movies that gets a completely unqualified endorsement from me. Is just very good. I very much so loved it, and that I, I, I I'm not even gonna get into the reflections and everything that it set off. It did a lot, I guess. For me to question the nice guy complex and all that other stuff about all this. I mean, I try to be kind, and considerate to my female contacts. So I will just say though that I don't conceptualize myself as necessarily the well, I mean, kind in the entirely innocent fashion. Obviously, I wouldn't. Well, I mean, I guess you could say that my intentions towards them are not. When we talk about purity, we we should really be very less black and white about the way that we think about it, and think about it more as a spectrum of purity. You know, so I wouldn't say that those intentions are entirely innocent, but they're. It's not as if they're pure wicked. It's not as if the only thing I want is to get my dick wet, so to speak. I've got. I want like actual relationship with them. I don't. It's not. It's not that simple. Loveless sex would never be sufficient. So. Just laying that card out there. So, anyways, moving on though. When I look at the MCU and like Hollywood and and what's going on and all the news and everything, I hear about things like the way that they have to try to market everything to the Chinese, which pisses me off because the only thing that translates across cultures in the most easy way is all these lasers and explosions and that sort of thing, because you don't have to translate that to the local dialect, and it just cuts across cultures in the most easy and efficient fashion. And I hate it. I hate that this is now considered a goal of Hollywood, and that anything that isn't pitching itself to the Chinese market is going to be like instantly rejected in terms of script and everything. I fucking hate all this crap. I mean, that them having to make everything in such a way. Well, the Chinese censors will be bothered by that. You know what? Fuck the Chinese. like, like honestly, ugh. All this allegiance to Xi Jinping and all this other shit. Like, no. God damn it. This is some bullshit. So anyways, Hollywood and the MCU, like, I don't want to feel this way. I mean, the MCU has a large fandom. It has Marvel fans, and my message to them would be, I would love to live in a universe where we could both have our way, but unfortunately, the way that Hollywood operates is now showing me that, if you have a bunch of superhero movies that are high budget blockbusters, you're going to crowd out any space whatsoever for mid budget films, which means that this is a zero sum game that I don't want to participate in at all. I don't want anything to do with fighting a zero sum game, and only reluctantly enter into the space of fighting a zero sum game. I didn't want this. I didn't want this zero sum fight. I wanted a world in which, we could have the MCU and alternatives to the MCU coexisting side by side, but that's not the world I live in. I greeted the MCU with initial excitement. I was caught up in the first wave, and that I went and saw, X-Men in theaters. I saw Spider-Man 1 and 2. Fortunately, based on what happened to 3, I never even tuned in for that portion of it. I heard that it turned out to be a real train wreck, and I'm glad I avoided it, and just left it there. Like Toby as Spider-Man, but they made a train wreck out of it in the end, because too many hands got themselves in the pie of the operation and wanted to do a bunch of things to it and add, multiple villains, and so the story just kind of went off the rails entirely, and I fucking hated it. So, anyways, the I know that a lot of the comic book fans were like super excited to see this, and my nerdy self from a teenager was excited to see it, but as for me, eventually the MCU just dragged on and on and on until it was in territory of, covering characters that I never really gave much of a shit about, in the universe, or just hadn't gotten around as a kid to exploring. And just my I grew up, and then my interest became different things. I got interested in different stuff, and by that point, I stopped caring what was happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I haven't been back to the theaters in a very, very long time, because of it. And knowing that there was maybe one movie in all of 2019 that I was interested in as well, when before, in a year you could expect multiple movies before the MCU came along, I'm now at a point in which I am literally excited whenever I see a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie fail. I want it to fail. I am rooting for the downfall of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I didn't want to be in this position. I didn't get to this point from a vantage point of, oh boy, fuck those Marvel fans, I want to take it away from them. No, it's not like that. I got to this point reluctantly because I ended up unfortunately realizing I can't win without them losing. I don't want to be in this position any more than you do, Marvel fans, but at this point, fuck the MCU. May it fail, and force Hollywood to wake the fuck up and start taking risk again.